going on, guys? Brandon Charleston here with another quick tutorial for you. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can use an AI coding IDE such as Cursor in order to not only rip through massive amounts of CSV files for sales and outbound, but to even fully enrich them for their email address and even have a fully scored and enriched list that you can literally send it off to a cold email campaign right from Cursor or upload it to another platform like Clay to further refine the list. All right, so just as a familiarity check, we are in Cursor right here, and this is the project that I set up, really where it's GTM waterfall enrichment. And I just simply built out an enrichment waterfall, which waterfall is really, starts with one email finder, and if it doesn't find an email address, it moves to the next one, moves to the next one until it comes up with a deliverable email address. So just to get you aware and kind of your lay of the land, Cursor is an IDE, which is also known as an integrated development environment. And really it can do literally anything, coding, create files, it can run terminal commands. This is basically a super agent. So if you're using platforms like ChatGPT or Claude, it's basically child's play. I mean, it's great for everyday use, but for some serious use cases, this is definitely the platform to use. So one of the things that you want to be familiar with is just getting familiar with your up in the upper right here of the files. And this is nothing more than a folder. So if you just create an empty folder and you can literally just put any sort of files in there. I mean, I open it for like downloads folder, our organization of our life, things like that. And then this gives the AI agent access to the working directory to be able to do whatever you want to do. So in this one, what we want to do, I've already prepared a GitHub repository, which is open. And so this is going to be in the description as well. So you can literally just clone or fork it and be able to build on it and do what you need to do. So all you need to do is just go to code and then you're going to hit copy. And then you're just going to go into Cursor. You should see the splash screen right here. But if I were to even go clone repo and then punch that in and then hit enter, it's going to pop up a dialog and then you're going to be able to select where you want to save that on your hard drive. And I would recommend starting with a higher hierarchy like developer projects or coding projects or GTM mastermind, whatever you want to do to make sure that you know where to find it from there. And then it's going to clone it, and then you're going to be able to see a lot of different files that are imported from here, which is basically all of these. And so to go, I guess just to get you started, one of the things that we're going to use for this demonstration is an enrichment called FullEnrich. And what this does is allows you to use a waterfall where I explained is starts with one waterfall method or email or phone number. And if it does not find a deliverable email, it's going to move to the next. And if it doesn't, next, et cetera, right? And one of the cool things here is that FullEnrich is you can actually make one API call and then it's going to continuously go until it returns back. So that way it's a lot more simple for you to be able to move on with your workflow. And I'll go over that here in a second. But for demonstration purposes, we're going to go over FullEnrich just so I can show you how easy it is to really just get it plugged in and go from there. So what you're going to want to do, like I said, clone it and then just get familiar with how to even use it. A lot of this stuff, you're really not going to need to know a whole lot. I'm talking like you don't need to code anything. So just stay with me here. Basically, you're going to need to set up a FullEnrich account. And then obviously you're going to want to go to fullenrich.com, and you can see here that they're having a Black Friday or Cyber Monday kind of deal. So that's on you. Go ahead and savings, all that kind of stuff. And so we could basically find emails and phone numbers. I mean, pretty typical landing page, right? But one of the cool things about this, as I mentioned, is if you just sign up and then you can go into their API docs. So we have right here API documentation. And with anything, you're going to want to dive in and look, see what endpoints they have and just get familiar with this. Now, if you're already intimidated by API documents, basically, I'm not going to say they're all the same, but if you can figure out how API works, which is really you're sending information or you're getting information. That's really about it. So it's almost as if we were playing baseball or football and I threw a ball to you. I'm technically making a post request, right? I'm sending you information or sending you a ball and you're catching it in order to receive the data, right? If the person was going to throw the ball back to me, I'm doing a get request. So I'm saying, give me the ball, right? So we're just basically doing API calls, more or less, right? That's kind of a sports everyday Joe or Jane explanation of API. The API is the communication that allows different software to communicate with each other. And it's literally kind of the freeway of where data is. So think of like, the freeways in your city, like that is how you get to and from. That's how data gets to and from places. So just hold that thought because it's super important here. But you're going to want to get familiar with everything here. And then even then, you could literally just copy this URL and you can put that into Cursor. And you can just literally say, explain this to me as if I'm 10 years old or a junior salesperson or somebody who's not technical at all, right? So it'll be able to explain that for you definitely until you can get to your level of where you can actually start to learn, so they're not throwing all this technical jargon for you. So with that said, that's pretty much what I did. And then if you just get familiar with, being able to know the directory and the structure with every file and folder structure, you can really start to get organized, no different than you would with your computer. And that's super important here because one of the key things here is we're looking over the README file. So this is basically going to take a CSV and we're going to, let me just pull up this example here. We have example CSV. So a CSV file, we're used to seeing it, at least if you're like me, we used to see it in columns and rows, right? Kind of like an Excel spreadsheet or Clay or Google Sheets, things like that. Well, if you think about it, it's really just comma separated variables or comma separated values, of being able to know first name, last name, domain, ABCD, whatever that is. You have literally columns and rows of data, and that allows us to be able to more easily read it, right? Big thing here is you can literally see this is a raw CSV. Now this is mock data because obviously for YouTube purposes and for privacy purposes I can't display private information, but this is mock data, and so that way you can see kind of like what CSV looks like in order to actually know what to do and things like that, right? So if I were to pull in context and say example or sample CSV, and then I typed in analyze this, and then create the output and all this other stuff, you basically prompt it to say what you want to do. It's going to be able to output exactly as you are, as the CSV is, and give you some real good information, and it'll rip through faster than you know it. And I'm telling you, we're talking some massive CSV files. So how does it do that? Well, I'm glad you asked, Brandon. Well, we use Python, all right? So we have different Python, which is .py. And so what this does, we have CSV processor right here. And the CSV processor, it imports specific libraries in order to actually support that, because Python as it is just a coding language. So we need to import different dependencies and libraries in order to actually do the thing, right? And two of those that I like to use a whole lot, in fact, I use one more than the other, just because I found it to be really fast. And then that's based on my own experience. So I would say just keep trying things out. And think about polar bears, right? You have pandas and polar bears. So pandas is more commonly known because the LLMs are saying, oh, I need to look at a CSV. Let me just import pandas, and then it's going to work. But polars is actually a much faster library in Python, and I found it to just be holistically a lot faster. So compare your results, obviously, but polars is one of the ones that you'll just need to say, hey, instead of pandas, let's use polars, right? The other thing here is being able to create what you call a virtual environment, which is VENV. And the reason I do this quite often, especially for client projects, is because think of it like this. A virtual environment is kind of like a room in a house. And this room is not virtual, but I'm creating an isolated box in my whole house, right? And what I want to do is anything that I do inside this room, I don't want it to affect my entire house. So let me give you an example. If I were to make bacon, and everybody loves bacon, like let's be real here. If you don't like bacon, you're missing out. Anyway, so if I were to make bacon, right, my kids are like, ooh, what's that smell? My wife's like, oh, are you making bacon, And I'm like, yeah, I'm making bacon. Well, the thing is when you cook bacon in your kitchen, the smell goes everywhere, right? I mean, everybody knows when you're cooking some bacon. So, and that's with anything that smells, right? Obviously, you want it to be a good smell. But if I were to create a virtual environment and I made my kitchen a virtual environment, I'm basically containerizing, or I'm putting it in an isolated environment where I don't need to really worry about a whole lot. and the smell or anything that affects the kitchen is not going to affect the whole house, ideally, right? So that was a horrible metaphor. That was kind of a daddy metaphor, but I think you know what I'm talking about, right? So if I were to create a virtual environment for doing something like this, there very well could be some dependencies that are installed on my computer that I don't want to affect my entire computer. And that's super important because when you're running code, a lot of things can happen, a lot of things can break. The last thing you want is some issues with your computer, right? So the general thing here is you're going to want to start it with a virtual environment. You want to use polars in order to analyze large amounts of CSVs. And then once you analyze your CSV, wherever you get it from, obviously anywhere. And for us at Top of Funnel, we do a lot of web scraping. That's our name of the game. That's my wheelhouse, right? But if I were to web scrape lots of CSVs and lots of data, I'm going to import that into this project or whatever the client or GTM motion that we're doing. And we're going to start to aggregate and put together a lot of different intelligence factors and then clean up the list so that way it can be consumed or uploaded to Clay, or we can take the next step from there. Well, using something like FullEnrich is going to allow us right within Cursor to be able to even append email addresses to it, right? So we have just an example here, which is me. Go ahead and email me. It's all good. But my email address is right here. But if I were to have a first name, last name, company name, domain, a typical CSV that we usually have, along with other factors that you have in there, you're going to see the data points, right? And if we were to go through here, it would say, okay, there's your email address, deliverable, and this shows my phone number, enriched, all good. Total amount of enrichment credits used. That's interesting that it says 0. But anyway, so you're going to want to, just really append your email address from there. Now, the thing is sometimes, depending on your platform, depending on your Python environment, it's going to, and this is the beautiful thing about using an agent in Cursor, is when it runs it, you want to monitor it to make sure it's going. Sometimes you want to drive it, to be a little bit faster. Sometimes, because it'll just be super conservative. So sometimes you're like, hey, let's not go 100%. So we're bumping the rev limiter of getting errors, but let's say 90% to where you're able to hit the rates, the API rates consistently with success, but know that you're going in a way that's not going to take forever, right? That's the key here. And so that's super important. Number 2 is logging, and number 3 is proper error handling. So this really depends on the nature of your CSV and your computer, but that's just one of the things that you're just going to have to dive in and just use natural language to talk to the agent to say, hey, what is going on here? I want a clean CSV so I can upload this to Clay, or I can upload this to Instantly, or whatever your next step is towards actually doing cold outbound, right? Whether it's calling, emailing, LinkedIn, things like that. And so one of the things with FullEnrich is that it actually uses what you call an async API. Now, what does async API mean? Well, what this does is says this API is synchronous. Well, what that means is when you start an enrichment, the API the response will be not the result of the enrichment, but the ID. So think of it like this. If I were to start a process, instead of immediately responding, saying, oh, I need this, and then you get a response back, that is more of a real-time or an immediate response. When something is like this, async, it basically means that they're working on it and they'll get back to you when it's done. That's pretty much what it means from an API perspective. And so what do? What you do is you have 2 choices. So one of them typically people do, like with Clay or N8N, this is one of those things that you just got to decide what the best result is for you. So if you were to send something and once the enrichment is complete, it'll actually send it to what you call a webhook URL, which is basically like an open API endpoint where it's basically saying, hey, when you're ready and you're done, just let me know, right? It's kind of like having that friend that says, hey, you can call me whenever you want. I'm always available. Just call me. So when you call them, they're going to receive your data or your call, and they're going to be ready to go. But polling is kind of like having kids in the back when you're on a road trip, and they're saying, hey, are you there yet? Are you there yet? Are you there yet? Are you there yet? Right? This is basically pulling it where we send it off and then we're trying to just be like, hey, is this there? We're constantly like tapping it. And then once it's done, we catch the results and there we go. So I like to go my kids route and just be like, hey, are you done yet? Are you done yet? Right? So what I usually do, and this is in the Python script as well. So we'll send the request and then we'll do a polling, right? So we'll check every few seconds or whatever. And then once we get back the results, it's going to append it to the CSV and then it'll just go row by row or line by line and just continue to roll on. Another thing that you may want to consider doing too, because again, your mind is your limiting factor when it comes to using tools like Cursor and your environment. It can literally do whatever you want, is to run things in parallel. So sometimes you may want to do parallel API calls. Sometimes you may want to do rate limits with parallel and also put your computer in what you call caffeinate, so that way it doesn't go to sleep. That's a command on Macs anyway. And then that way I can go and do whatever I want and come back and then check on the job, right? The difference here is that I'm obviously using it on my local machine, but when you're using something like Clay or if you send it off to the cloud, it's one of those things that, you know, balance on that aspect. Whether you're doing it locally to literally rip through faster because it's on your local machine, then it's a CSV on your hard drive. Or if you use something like Clay, well then it's also good because it can run in the background a lot more autonomously. But at the same time, you want to be able to monitor it to make sure that it's going no problem, right? So for background jobs like overnight, I don't know, you got to pick and choose what you want to do. But within Cursor, it's definitely a lot of fun to go with this, right? So this is basically a waterfall method that I mentioned. And again, waterfall is the ability to use multiple vendors to where it checks with one and then it moves to the next and then it moves to the next. And I'm trying to see, here we go. Waterfall enrichment. So this will use like the first one, not found, invalid email, not found, and then you'll have Clearbit or contact out, be like, bam, there's the results, right? So with just one API endpoint, you'll be able to make the call, and then that way you don't have to set up the logic, you don't have to deal with errors, things like that. You just send it, and then once you get the data back, you can go ahead and append it to your CSV here. And then just continue to roll out. And that's just one of the biggest things that I love using Cursor about, is because we can have massive CSVs. We're talking, you know, 100K plus. Sometimes it's in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands where I don't have to, it's a whole TAM or CRM, right? So if you have a CRM that's really messy, we can just rip through it, no problem. So anyway, that does it for me. I just wanted to make this super quick and helpful. I would just say, just get Cursor, just freaking dive in, you know. Check out my other videos. I'm gonna be doing a lot more Cursor tutorials. Definitely would love to continue to expand on that. I'll try to make it as everyday Joe and everyday Jane as possible so you don't go to sleep on me. But with that said, if you ever want to reach out, please check out my website, topoffunnel.com. Reach out if you'd love to work together, and we'll consider from there. But with that said, I appreciate you watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.